So hi, welcome to this talk. So basically, I'm gonna give a talk on how to archive data using Record Builder. So this would be basically involve some part of code on how we would gonna archive the data in Record Builder in some few lines of code. So I'll start. So start with my introduction. Who am I? So hi, my name is Altamash Shaikh. I am a senior software engineer working with Matomo, mainly in plugins team. I am based in India. Mumbai is my city. I am working with Matomo for more than 3 years, and I have in all more than 10 plus years of experience with software development. So yeah, that's me. Then why we are here? So we are here because we want to learn what is archiving. Then why archiving? And the main agenda of our topic is what is record builder and how anyone can use record builder to archive data. So if you see, the first question is what is archiving. So archiving means aggregating your raw data into archive data. It is nothing a fancier thing. It just archives the raw data so that it could be used frequently and more easily. So then why archiving? So if you see, Matomo generally logs all the raw data from the website into one or multiple database tables. Okay. So if someone wants to view the data directly, it's not useful at all. Reason being, in it would be a very large data. If I have like 100,000 visitors coming to my site a day, seeing each line is not useful. And if we try to aggregate this data at runtime, that would be more resource intensive, and it would be a repetitive process for same data for same user. It would be a very uh, it would be not highly performance efficient. So to solve this issue, what Matomo does is basically Matomo archives the data, and all the reports which you see are built on top of archive data. So what happens due to this is the reports are accessed fast, and you don't need to keep archiving again and again. So you save lot of CPUs at your database and as well as other resources. Any questions still now? Okay, I'll move ahead. So then what is record builder? So we can say record builder is the smallish aggregation logic which is required to archive data. It's basically it encapsulate all the functionality of archiving, and it basically it lets you only write those specific function. Using that you can record they basically you can build the archive data. It is one of the most easiest way for Matomo to archive data using few lines of code. So before going into more deep dive, we want to know how Matomo data is archived, and basically how Matomo archives data. So first, and for any site, when you add your JS code or anything, a raw data is recorded. And later, an archiving process is executed to process this data. Okay. So when you process, the most granular point of data in Matomo is day. For any day, the most granular part is day. Then there is week. Then week data is built by aggregating all the archive days. For week, we don't process from like 1 to 7. No, we don't do that. We do build the data from the archive data. So similarly for month would be combination of all the archive weeks plus days, archive days. So that's your month aggregation. Then similarly, year is combination of all months, basically all the months data which is archived. So in this way, Matomo tries to build as much as less basically uh, run the archiving as long as possible and build the data using the existing archives. Okay, so I'm going to share an example. So for our example, to learn more about it, this is what we're going to do with the plugin also. We're going to archive this data. So assume you're recording data in for a day, like your campaign data, like campaign 1. Your cost is 1500 and your revenue is 3000. Similarly for campaign 2 is 1300, revenue is 2600, and we have data from July 1 to July 7. So this is your raw data. So this doesn't give any much information. It's just a raw data. What we can do is we can pivot this and build data like, okay, day wise, what campaign was the cost, what was the revenue. Okay, day wide campaign 2 has 2200 of cost and 3500 of revenue. Or we can do is total campaign wise revenue for the entire July week. We can see, okay, for campaign 1 the cost was around 8900 and around 15,000 is the revenue. So it's something more useful report. If you compare this with this, this is more easier and more easier. So archiving is basically turning this data into this kind or this kind of data. So basically archiving turns data into this, and later week is built from this data, then month it would be built from all the weeks data, and so on. So basically it was a sheet where data had from July 1st to July 7th. The raw data was containing two metric, cost and revenue, and dimensions were date and campaign name. We saw the sheet, and we'll now see a live example to archive this raw data in Matomo. Okay, so for that I've already created a test record builder plugin. Okay, to demo it. And as soon as you create a plugin, you get the plugin file. In there is a by default event called register events, where you can specify there's an event called add record builder, and you can register your record builder. For this plugin, I've adding my record builder to this site, an array of record builder, so you can have n number of it. You can also pass some parameters to it if you want, and that would be available at the time of archiving. So what would happen is whenever an archiving runs, this event is executed, and then later one by one all the record builders are executed. So you don't have to specify like do this on archiving, nothing. You just have to say that whenever there is any archiving, you just register your record builder. And similarly, we have created record builder. It is basically a class where it is a class which extends record builder. You can name it anything, whatever you want. The most essential part of it is to this two method, get record meta and aggregate. You need only this method to aggregate your raw data. And so if we see this methods, the first thing is you have to specify the record name. Record name is what where the data, the basically there's a table, in that there is a label and then there is a value to that table. So this is the table because Matomo has n number of reports, so differentiated you have to specify which type of your record. This is the unique name of your record. Then what we need is these two functional are really optional. We'll come to this functional, but it's nothing much. It's construct. It's normal constructor. If you don't write it, it will still work. And another thing is enabled. Basically, if you don't want to run this archiving for some customers, for some site or something, that logic goes here. Otherwise, you don't need to add this logic. It's by default enabled for everyone. And this is the second one, which is called get record meta. In this, you have to just return an array where you have to specify your record name and what type of it is. So Matomo has two type of record. One is blob and one is numeric. Blob means you can store an array of result, and numeric you just store a single value like number of visits. That is the only thing that can be stored in. But since we seeing our data, it has series of like an array of data, we would be storing it as a day wise data, an array, so we have specified as blob. Now coming to the main function, which is the aggregate. An aggregate function require your data to be translated into data table. So that's why we say we create a new empty data table object and we try to aggregate it. So for aggregation of this data, this raw data, it can come from your database table, it can come from your API, It can come from anything, like your JSON file or anything wherever you store this data. You just need to read it day wise and basically archive it. So what we have done is we get data from API. We have mocked this function, and instead of getting from API, we have hard coded it the JSON. What you see there is exactly the same data, and we have hard coded it. And if you see, it just has date, label, cost, revenue. Same date, label, cost, revenue for all the 7 days, and we are getting the data. As soon as we get the data, the most important part of data table is you need a label and matrix. So a label is basically whatever for that dimension you want to build the report. In terms of date is by default there because it archives by day, so it by default there. So the second is your label for which the data would be like aggregated. So in this case, our label is campaign name. It could be anything for you. It for some it could be campaign name, uh, campaign ID, it could be campaign source, or it could be a totally different thing. But for this example, we have just label as campaign name. Okay. And then what we do is we do some row with label. We basically iterate this data and add to data table. This is one way of adding the data to data table. So this is an empty object, we are adding it. We are saying for this label, this is the record. So for this label, basically we are adding this metric data. Similarly, we are adding for other metric data. Once this is done, it returns an array. The array would be your record name and the data. So it's your record name and data. Once this is done, you have successfully added a data, archive data in Matomo. You don't need to do anything, nothing else. Only by this logic, your data has been archived for a day. Okay. I'm gonna demonstrate it via test cases like how it flows, but this is the only line of code you needed to archive the data in Matomo. Now Matomo will create an archive in the Matomo archive blob table records, and this entry would be pulled out from there when you want to view the report or anything. So I'm gonna demonstrate it more clearly with the help of a test so that you know how things happen at runtime. So I've written a simple integration test. Basically what it does, it will build data from 2020, like 1st of July to 7th of July, what we have it will run daily archive, and then it is gonna make an archive for week, range. Then we gonna test the data how it looks versus for day, week, and range. So I'm gonna run this command now. So I have added a debugger. We need to wait for a minute for this debugger, and I'm gonna demonstrate you similarly how the data looks in database. Why is this not running? It should be done. I'm not sure why it's taking a minute, but yeah, it's done. Good. Give me a minute. Okay. So this is my database for this test. Okay. Since we are aggregating the data for the month of July. So there would be a table called archive underscore. And since we have set our archiving type as blob, so it would be archive underscore blog underscore 2024 and 7. It's still just still month. So this is created, and if you see, this is the name of our archive record, and we have specified the ID, and you see we have built day records. Period 1 is for day, 2 is for week, 3 is for month, 4 and 5 is for range. So we have added a record, it added as a blob. Basically, what we do is we serialize the data, the array, and then gzip it for space issues, basically to store the data in less space. So this is where your archive data lies. Okay. Now, if you see, it has archived all the day for all the day. Now, I'm gonna run it for week. Okay. As soon as this is done, if I go back and run this again, there is one more entry here, which is of, okay, I'll zoom it. People can see. Yeah. There is one more entry for 1st of July to 7th of July, and it says the period is 2, which is the week data, which we have just archived. Okay, now this is range. We have done it for range. So there would be an entry with period 5. So if I run it again, I have another entry of ninth record, which is 5. So now we have archived the day for range. Now this data is archived. So whenever you see any report like a report for page URL or report for events, it is basically, this is the process. Basically, data is archived, and whenever you pull, like, request a data for any specific date, week, or something, this is basically is used. You say for this ID site, I need a week data, and you just need to pass a date, because that's how you select that date in Matomo. So we need to pass the parameter. Okay, you build an archiver, and then you say get me the data table where record name is this. We have created a record name. This would basically this what we have created in this file. And similarly, we'll get data. We have gotten data for day, week, week. Similarly, we can get data for, let's say, range. We can get for month or anything. And then what happens is we are comparing the data for 3rd of July. So if you go to 3rd of July, okay, our campaign one's cost was 1000 and revenue was 1880. Similarly, for campaign two cost, it was 780 and 1350 was the revenue. Okay, so we have same say 1880 for campaign one, sorry, 1000 and 1880, and similarly for campaign two, 750 and 1350. And if I see for a week, it is the same for week, where the total data it shows for the week, as well as this is, yes, this is the week data. 8910 is the sum, and for revenue is 1580 for campaign 1, and for campaign 2 is 7830 and 18400 revenue for campaign 2. And if I see, okay, all of my test cases passed easily. So this all data is true. Everything passed. So I get the data. So what happened here is, if we go back, is what happened is by default the aggregation sums the metric. Basically, it will sum up all your metric. If you don't specify any aggregation operation, it will sum up your metric. So what happened here is, when I was viewing for day, it basically summed up all the record for day 3. It was this and this for campaign 780 and 1350. And when I was doing for week, it label was a dimension, so it sum up all the cost and revenue accordingly. But there could be a case where you need other operation like min or max, like you want minimum of cost, like maximum of cost and minimum of revenue, something like this. So if I see for a week report, the maximum cost have occurred is 2810 for campaign 1 and 2200 for campaign 2. The revenue, minimum revenue, 1600 and is 1350. So how we do it? So to achieve this, so when you have made your record builder, there is where you can specify the operation. So basically, you can specify the column aggregation operation. But if you don't specify, by default, every metric is considered as sum. So you can specify your metric name, cost should use max, and revenue should use min. If you add some different logic like multiply by 100 if it is in this value, or reduce it by 10% if it is in this value, you can still do it. You can add a anonymized function for that metric, and you can add your logic here. But for this demo, we're gonna just do max min. So if I now specify max and min, my test for week is gonna fail definitely. So this is for my week for entire. This is gonna fail because the data is gonna differ. So let's see if I just run this test, what error do I get? Okay, so this says an error. The error it says is the cost should be 2810 and revenue should be 1600 for campaign 1, because we are doing max and min, and this is what it shows for campaign 1. When you take max is 2810 and 1600 revenue, and for campaign 2 is 2200 and 1350. Cost is 2200 and revenue should be 1350. So it is this simple, like adding by few lines of code. Basically this part of code, you can aggregate the data, you can log the data if from, or you can build the data from. If you have an existing API, you need to add those data to Matomo, you can add it. And this is how you can build this data. You don't need any write a long line of code or anything. Just with few lines of code, this data would be available to you. And easily you can build UI. And when you build the UI, since it's data table, automatically pagination and everything could be taken care of by Matomo, and you don't need to build an UI also. So in few lines of code, you would be able to build a report. So this is what you can, how to archive data using record builder, the example was. And that's it for my talk. Any questions around here for anyone, or does anyone want me to repeat anything? I can go there.
No, actually, there is no question because your talk is very complete. So thank you.
Okay.
Um, is someone want to ask some question in the YouTube chat? We're just waiting for a few seconds.
Yeah, yeah,
But of
that's it.
course, thank you so much for the quality of your talk, which was very technical but clear in the same time. So as a developer, I enjoy your talk, and that's a great way to. So the part that I love is when you wrote test to test the plugin, because when I create plugin, I don't like tests, but I have to test my own plugins, and especially when you have a report builder, that is very annoying to test. But yes, thank you so much for what you've done here. And I have a question for you. So
Yeah.
if that's what you've shown here today about campaigns, data, and the record builder, do you want to make some custom plugins for the community, or is this like specific development for your customer? What would you want to do with that feature?
Okay. So this feature is now widely used by Matomo. We also archive data using
Yes,
record
it's
builder.
experimental, but you are close to a real plugin that can handle min and max for campaigns, to handle maybe budget when you call
Yes.
the Google Ads API,
Yes.
to maybe calculate an ROI or something like that.
This can be used to basically leverage the cost. Basically, what you can do is, currently Matomo, you cannot add cost from like Google or Facebook of your campaign. So similar way, we can add a plugin where we
Okay.
read it from API, or we read it from, let's say, a downloaded CSV file or something. And then what we have logged for the existing campaigns, we add revenue for them, and then you can see what was, sorry, cost for them. So basically you can see the entire report at one place. What was your cost, what was your revenue, what was your conversions, what was your click for this. And you don't need to like code too many things for this if we just extend this one.
Okay, so there is like something to dig into in order to create a wonderful plugin.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you again. There is still no question in the chat, but obviously your talk will be available on replay within a few weeks or months.
Yep.
Thank you. So we have like 30 minutes. So maybe people in European time, it's time to eat
Yeah.
because
Good.
Matomo Camp never stops. So maybe take that half hour to do that thing, and we all see back together at 2 p.m. And thank you again. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Bye. Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.